Good evening.
Good evening.
I'd like to welcome everyone here, our members, and I know we have a lot of guests this evening that are looking forward to hearing Tom speak. So welcome to everyone. I'm Barbara Johannes, and I am president of the Dana Point Historical Society, and we have a number of board members here tonight. I'd just like to have our board members stand. So Nancy, Bruce, I see Gary, Bob Minty, Keith, Johannes, any other board members? So, and Max, who was downstairs getting ready. And Joel, who's waving over there. Has it been 2 newsletters ago, we had an article about the Dana Point lanterns, the original Dana Point lanterns that went in 1928-29 and were celebrated in 1929 when the governor came down and Woodruff threw the ceremonial switch. So 2 of those old lanterns have been restored by the city. One had to be taken down. It was the last lantern standing on Violet Lantern, about a block toward the ocean from the Lantern Community Village Park. And it had been there, and I'm sure you've all noticed, if you were on Violet Lantern about to take a left into La Plaza, rusting away there for years. So we've got some more people coming in, and there's a few chairs up here, and maybe Keith can help get a couple more from the other room if we need them. So please come in and join us. Some here. Help yourself. We can always sit back on the other side. So 2 of those lanterns they've completed restoration on 2 of the lanterns. And it seems that sometime next week, the city plans to start the installation of these lanterns in the Lantern Village Community Park. And what our hope is that installation will be completed, and that for our December meeting, where we usually have some sort of Christmas open house, we might be able to have it in the Lantern Village Park and have the ribbon cutting for those 2 restored lanterns. On November 17th, we have our next meeting, which is really a little earlier than normal. We have Dave Matusek coming, and he has written the book San Onofre, and it's a book about San Onofre from the beginning to the present. And when I say beginning, I don't know if he did geological formations, but he definitely covers Native Americans who lived in that area. This is the second edition of his book that he will be speaking from, and he has added a chapter on women surfers and some of the recent research in the first women's surfing clubs that were in the 20s and 30s. So we're looking forward to Dave on November 17th. So please put that on your calendar. And another thing that's happening is we have 2 ladies from the IDI, I'm not sure if that's the Interior Design Institute, I think that's what it is, and they're doing research on how to restore, or how the building that was once Woodruff's real estate office at the V, where Del Prado meets PCH, that building and a lot of other, there was another project earlier with the premise of how the building would be restored and for what purpose. And these ladies are working on the project, and we have, they've joined the Historical Society, and we are permitting them to use some of our historic photos. And they plan on presenting in January, which will be an interesting presentation. And hopefully that will all take place. Now, I get to introduce you to Tom Blake, but Tom really needs no introduction. We have 2 more people who have come in and need seats, so I think we have some out in the foyer that we can bring in. So you've seen Tom's picture. He's written up in, he's a columnist actually for the Dana Point Times, and his book was introduced in the Dana Point Times. But I wanted to just say a few things about Tom. I had him fill out a bio form for me, and I'm just going to tell you a few facts that you may not know, and then Tom's going to fill in the blanks. Of all the places that you might think where Tom was born, it was Jackson, Michigan. Anybody else here that was born in Jackson, Michigan? I'll bet there's some people here that are from Michigan. Max Brown. Okay. He went to grammar school there. He graduated from Jackson High School. He went on to DePauw University in Greencastle, Indiana, and then also attended the University of Michigan. And he served in the military. He joined the Navy and served as a lieutenant in San Diego, Vietnam, and Nevada. It'll be interesting to hear what you did in Nevada.
You don't want to know.
He arrived in Dana Point in 1987. And what brought him here? The weather and the ocean. He has career highlights. He worked and managed Victoria Station Restaurants, the chain, for 8 years. And then he became the owner and founder of Tutor and Spunky's, and of course he's going to talk to us about that. His activities in Dana Point include the Chamber of Commerce and writing as a newspaper columnist for 26 years. Important events in his life: meeting Greta. Greta's here with us this evening. And let's see, what other things did I highlight here? He enjoys stand-up paddleboarding in Dana Point Harbor. He's made some friends in his life, including Johnny Cash, so maybe he'll tell us a little bit about that. And he's met several other personalities, I think, across the years. So his book, and he's written several, but his book on Tutor and Spunky's is what brought him here this evening, because this is local history, right? So without any further ado, Tom.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. Tonight, we're going to cover 26 years of Dana Point and Deli history in about 30 minutes. That's about 1 minute per year, so we're going to fly pretty fast. And if you want more details on the facts, it's in the book. This book. We're going to start in 1988, summer of '88. I had moved from the San Francisco Bay Area to Dana Point, but I still had my corporate job, and I was traveling all the time, and I said, I want to find a place in Dana Point where I can have my own business. What the heck could I do? Well, I did work for Victoria Station for 8 years, a restaurant chain some of you may be familiar with. And I thought maybe I had learned enough to start a coffee shop or a deli or something like that. And so when I was home in Dana Point, I would drive around kind of keeping my eyes open for location. And I thought it would be probably a deli. One day I'm driving up Coast Highway, and across from Rubens, there was a vacancy. And it was next to the donut shop, near the Shell station, and also next to Mills TV. Mills TV had vacated that spot. It had parking in front, visibility, accessibility, parking in the back, a donut shop next to it, and I said, wow, this is a perfect location. So I called the realtor, Robert Prophet. We got the landlord down. I signed a lease on August 1988, hoping to get the deli open by the end of the year so I could take the write-offs. Now, I was still working all that time in my corporate job because I needed the money to come in while we were doing the deli build-out. On December 22nd, 1988, I may have said 98, but 88, the deli opened. And this was on the front door. This is not a good place for a diet. And believe it or not, it's still there today.
Oh, man.
My first employee was on the left here, Theresa Gonzalez. She walked in one day and said, "Do you need help?" And I went, "Oh my gosh," reality hit. I needed to get an employee or two. And we worked together for a couple, 3 months. Now, occasionally, my wife at the time, one of the two sons would help out in the deli. They were my stepsons. A couple months went by. I said to Theresa, "We need some help." She said, "Well, the lady on the right, Rosa, is working at Taco Bell, and she would love to work." And she came and joined us, and those were my first two employees. These are a couple of the early customers. The one on the left in the necktie is JP, who was a salesman at the Mercedes dealer right across the street. The other guy is Alex Rensa-Paris, the sports barber, who has a barber shop to this day up above Stillwater, up there. In fact, I saw Alex there yesterday. And they were in the deli all the time. They're great customers. To be successful, a deli needed catering. And so this was our first catering order. It was a 6-foot sub for Rubens. And you'll notice Ruben in the light blue shirt on the right, and on the left was Mikey, my stepson, and when we delivered that sandwich. Early on, Theresa said to me, "Tom, we need a dressing for the subs, especially dressing." So one night I was sitting home with a little help from a Chardonnay, and I started mixing things and came up with the formula for Tutor's dressing. People were buying it, not in the bottles yet, but we said, "Hey, it's so popular, we'll bottle it and sell it." And they still have that there today. I had a wall of fame, and that meant the interior walls of the deli. I wanted to have a personality. I wanted to feature customers. I wanted to feature things that were of interest to me and build that up over the years. And this is one of the first things we had on the wall, and it was a piece of the Berlin Wall. Now that had just opened up in 1989, and Tom Manny, our customer, went over there, chipped out that piece, and brought it back to the deli, and this is it. It's at home now on our wall, and that was one of the first things that went on the Wall of Fame. Other things were pictures of customers. This is 76 pictures. I had 2 more of these around, and they love to come in and bring friends in and show, "Look, I'm on the wall," and then you write something on it. And that really helped make it a more personable, likable place, a kind of a locals place. Other things I had on the wall were this album. Well, why, Tom, would you have a Johnny Cash album on the wall? Because when I was a marketing director at Victoria Station, the restaurant chain, we hired Johnny to be our spokesperson and to do our commercials. And it was my job to get him hired and to work with him. And after about 6 months, he said to me, "Tom, you think Victoria Station would be willing to pay for an album of my train songs?" He said, "I will not charge you anything except 2,000 albums." And we agreed to do it. And we had to buy 50,000 from CBS Records. And my job was to go down and work on the album with Johnny, and I co-produced it with him. So that's why that was on the wall. Now, I had a friend in San Diego who was the vice president of marketing of the Visitors and Convention Bureau down there, and they advertised a lot in Sports Illustrated. He was invited every year when they started coming out with the swimsuit edition, the supermodels, to a cocktail party up at the Four Seasons in Newport, and he dragged me along. Well, we could get in line after some very nice cocktails and appetizers, and the supermodel would be seated, and she had a stack of posters that she would autograph, and for 4 years, I got a poster for the Deli. On the left is Joda Mascot, and she was Portuguese, and she wrote, you can see it down there, Power, Tutor, and Spunky. On the right is Ashley Montana, and she wrote, Grind It. This is the second group. On the left is Vendela from Sweden. She wrote on the Deli, and on the right is Kathy Ireland. And it was a lot of fun to have those ladies on the wall. Let me move this up a little bit. These were great customers, the firemen. They would pull up out in front of the Deli, and they had the speaker on the outside of their fire truck. This was before cell phones, so that if an emergency came up, they could boogie off. And when that happened, we'd go up, take up their food, and take it inside and keep it for them, and then they come back in a half hour or an hour. They were really great, great customers. I wanted to talk about the sandwich board, the menu board signs. I named all the sandwiches. If you see up there, if you can see it, that some of the names, Kelly's, Deb's Delight, Vero's Favorite, Fatalina's Choice, and Theresa and Rosa both had a sandwich named after them, and a lot of other people in situations did. But I wanted to point out something about this particular sandwich board. If you look at the BLT, underneath it is USC Forever. Now, if you're in Orange County, you've got to play it a little bit politically correct between USC and UCLA. So you see down below, Bruin territory, second from the bottom. That was the UCLA sandwich. Well, the UCLA people would come in and be all bent out of shape because they were listed underneath USC. And I'd say, just relax, take a look at what the USC sandwich is. It's bologna. They said, that's all right, keep it, keep it. In 1993, there were 3 events that affected the Deli. Let me get this moved down a little bit. And one more. The first one, I think many of you recall who were here, was the post office shooting on May 6, 1993. That photo is still on the wall at our post office. And Charlie Barbagalo, who was a loved mail carrier, was shot and killed by a disgruntled former employee. That morning I came into the Deli a little late. This was 75 yards away from us. Helicopters all over and a very strong police presence behind the post office. I didn't know why I walked in. A policeman walked in right behind me and made me get my 3 employees there and said, be careful, a killer is on the loose in the neighborhood. Wow. And I said, what do you want us to do, close? Now, we didn't have any customers because everything was blocked off. He said, no, we're going to protect you, but we need, because we're building this command post behind the post office, 240 sandwiches in an hour. And potato salad for 240. I called my 3 employees together, said, just get going on it. I've got to go to Smart and Final because I only had potato salad for 19 people. And I went down and bought their potato salad and their pasta salad, macaroni salad, whatever kind of salad they have, and we delivered those sandwiches. Now, at that time, the Deli was doing $400 a day average in sales. That day, we did 2,400. Wow. The next day, we did 2,400 because they ordered again because this guy was still on the loose. Eventually, he got killed, but, I mean, he didn't get killed, he got taken to prison. but he got discovered. But it certainly affected the deli. The next thing that affected the deli, the Laguna Beach fires, also in 1993. We could see, Theresa and I could see the fire on the ridge line above Laguna from the deli. And it broke your heart because you knew that homes were going up. What can we do? Well, let's make sandwiches. We'll do 50, and we'll take them, I'll drive them down to Main Beach in Laguna Beach, and we'll give them to the command post, another command post within 3 or 4 months. I got to Crown Valley going up Coast Highway, and it was blocked off. No residents could go in, nobody could pass. And I saw a policeman, I said, look, I've got these sandwiches for the firemen. He said, wait a minute, went out, checked with his boss, and then he came back, said, follow me. And the two of us went down up Coast Highway, sparks coming down, embers falling, smoke everywhere, no cars, no people, until we got to Main Beach, and it was chaos. Got to the command post, gave the lady the sandwiches, and she said, you have no idea how welcome these are going to be. They've been up there all night, and they're starved, and said, thank you very much, and it was really a great thing. This is the third thing that happened in 1993. Believe it or not, it was a phone call. I was up in Santa Rosa for Christmas visiting my 83-year-old mother. My wife was 6 years and her 2 boys stayed in Dana Point. Christmas Eve I called, nobody answered. Christmas Day I called, no answer. Now that bothered me a bit. I thought, uh-oh. The next morning I was going to call, but Mom and I are sitting around her table having breakfast and the phone rings. And I answer it and it's, hi honey, we had a great Christmas. I've been busy at work, weather's been great, and we moved out. No clue, no advance notice. I went, what? What do you mean you moved out? Where'd you go? Everything's okay, I just wanted to give you a heads up. Boom. I'm 9 hours away. Said to my mom, I got to drive back down. Now, it was a bad weather day. It took me 9 hours to get back. But I had on my lap a notepad, and I had a pen. Now, I was already distracted, so I had to be very careful driving. But I would write down as I drove, why didn't I know about it? What about the dogs? What about the deli? What about the bank accounts? What about the mortgage? All that stuff that goes through your mind. Got home, the house was cleaned out pretty much. They left a bed and a TV. I wrote all that down in that log. And every night I started to add to the log. 5 days later, a guy walks into the deli. I didn't recognize him. I thought he was a new customer. I said, hi, how can we serve you? He said, no, I'm serving you, your divorce papers. And it was in front of customers and my employees. And you know what I wanted to do. Theresa and Rosa grabbed me and said, you cannot do anything. Let him go. He was gone. That went down in this logbook. Divorce followed quickly. That went in the logbook. And then divorce. And I tried to start dating at age 54. You know, a guy that had been dumped by his wife. Oh, woe is me. And I would have good dates, bad dates, first dates, last dates, expensive dates, worthless dates, and I'd come home and write about it. And after 6 months, I said, I'm going to stay home a few nights and not try to go out and find a date because I want to put these notes together. And I did an edit and I put it into a short story, about 60 pages. Well, somebody must be interested in this. Probably the New York Times sent a query letter off to them. Probably the LA Times, no. Esquire magazine, no. Playboy, oh, too boring. Orange County Register, why don't you talk to the Dana Point News? There's 2 women editors there. Send them your stuff. Try to meet with them. Long story short, 6 months after the move out by my wife, I became a columnist for the Dana Point News. This is the first column, July 7th, 1994. Home Alone with Only Dogs for Company was the title. Well, I didn't know if I was going to write 4 columns, 5, 6, 20, or what. I had, of course, no idea that 26 years later I would have written 4,200.
Wow.
That's how it all started. Anyway, after a year, I decided to take those articles and put them together in a book called Middle-Aged and Dating Again, and this is it here. Now, I was really proud of this book, primarily for this reason. I had a quote on the back. In the 20 years I have known Tom Blake, he has become an authority on dating and relationships. Now, how the heck he knew that, I don't know, but it was Johnny Cash. And I really treasure this book for that reason. The years went by, and I was now writing for 10 newspapers owned by the Orange County Register. Not 1, 10, but I could use the same column. So it was busy time, and 3 years went by. So a woman comes into the deli, and we had a big carrot juice sign. And she said, "I'll have carrot juice, please." And she went over and sat down, and she was as pretty then as she is tonight. This is Greta here, my significant other. She went over and sat down, and Greta has a very inner beauty about her. Probably explains why she, for 32 years, was a special education teacher, mainly at RH Dana. But I went over, and I said, I was going to walk up to her and do this again, but this is, 24 years ago. "Would you like to have dinner?" And you said?
That would be lovely.
She said, "That would be lovely." 3 days later, we went to the Claim Jumper on La Paz, and we've been together ever since. So that was a great thing that happened. Well, I got to know the publisher of the Register itself, the 22nd largest newspaper in the United States. Tani Katz was her name. And I bugged Tani so much, I thought she was going to probably kick me off the paper, about writing for the big paper, as I always called it. So I wanted to write for the small papers, which I was writing for 10 of them. There were 32 of those, by the way. And finally, on August 1999, my first accent section article ran. Now I had the weekly papers, the Register, a deli growing, and it was crazy. But nice. Deli turned 12 in 2000. The picture on the left is Greta's daughter, Tammy, and her granddaughter, Ashley. Picture on the right is 4 years later, Ashley working at the deli. You never know where your customer, your employees were coming from. Well, we had another traumatic day on April 13, 2001. A guy walked into the deli and said, "Do you hear the news?" No. Said a guy just robbed the Bank of America down on Del Prado, and when he was coming out, the police started to chase him, and he holed up in a vacant apartment at the corner of Golden Lantern and La Cresta. And Theresa went ashen. She ripped her apron off, and she said, "I've got to go home. My grandbabies are right in the building next door, and my kid." And the guy said, "You can't go. It's blocked off everywhere." An hour later, we heard what happened. The guy comes out of this place with an Uzi. He's going to take on the police department, and they took him out. And that happened. Now, in 2003, it was a tough year for a little bit. I lost 2 very dear friends. On the left is June Carter Cash, Johnny Cash's wife. This picture was taken in 1977. And then the picture on the right, and she passed in February. He was sick. I didn't expect her to go. She was an incredible, incredible woman. On the right, the picture's from 1975. It was at the Victoria Station, Miami. The day that I met them, look, Johnny's in white, the man in black is in white. And my job was to convince him to become our spokesperson. And when I took him in and his little boys playing at the caboose and all this stuff, because the Victoria Station were train cars, he came out and said, son, he always called me son, I think you got a deal. And I called our president of the company and said, I think we got a deal. Johnny's going to do our commercials. And but it was tough losing them. He passed in August of that same year. I thought he was going to come to the Deli. He was out nearby one time, and his manager said, Tom, he just doesn't feel up to it, so I never really got to say goodbye to him. Well, because we had such great employees, Greta and I could get away. We both loved to travel. And we decided to go to Spain. And we're going to take the train from Madrid out, and a week before, separatists blew up the train station at Tosha. I wrote about that in one of my articles, that we were kind of, what should we go, should we not? And we decided, and the reader said, yes, go. So we went. We're in Nerja, down on the Costa del Sol. We're coming out of a grocery store, and somebody says, hey, Tom Blake. We turn around, and there's this family. We didn't know them. They were from Dana Point. They said they had read the article about Spain because they were coming to Spain. And we said, well, come to the Deli, and we'd like to get you a sandwich. Well, later that afternoon, Greta and I went down to the beach, and they came down, and that picture was taken, and I checked with them, and they're still in Dana Point. It's kind of neat. This is just a quick picture of the employees. I want to give you an idea of why I loved my employees and loved working there. In the middle is Ashley, Greta's granddaughter, Rosa on the right, Sandy, Vero, and they love to dress up and do stuff like that on Halloween. 2005. Oh my, right here in City Hall, the discussion started on the town center plan. Every small business along Coast Highway and Del Prado was worried because the R word was being used, redevelopment. We were afraid that they were going to come in, tear down our little buildings that we were in, build the high-rises, not the high-rises, the third-story ones. And it was a tremendous, tremendous worry through that 2005 year. However, we had some good news. I had been back to I've been on the Today Show twice. I forgot to mention that. And Good Morning America noticed that, invited me to come, and Greta and I went to New York, and I was interviewed by Diane Sawyer, and she was the most delightful person you will ever meet. Just a quick story. On the first time I went on the Today Show, I was working at the Deli at lunch, and the phone rings. And the guy said, this is Gil Reisfeld from the Today Show in New York. I need a copy of Middle-Aged and Dating Again tomorrow. Can you send it overnight? I said, I thought it was my fantasy football guys playing a joke on me because they knew I was excited about the book. So I said, Gil, can I call you back? And he got very insistent. Look, I am the producer of the Today Show. Here's my Federal Express number to send the book overnight, and here's their address. Rockefeller Plaza, 13th floor, Today Show. I said, maybe I better send this overnight. Took it over to the FedEx office in San Juan. Told the lady what I was doing. She was all excited and made me promise to tell her. I'd call her and tell her what happened. The next lunch, the phone rings again. It's my buddy Gil in New York. What are you doing this weekend? I said, Gil, I know I can't buy a date. This was before I met Greta. I can't buy a date, so I can do anything. What do you want? He said, we're bringing you into New York on Friday. You're going to be on the Saturday Today Show. Jack Ford was the guy that interviewed me. It didn't show in California. I was in the chair getting makeup on and stuff, and I said to the lady, I am so nervous. And she said, it's going to be the fastest 4 minutes of your life. And she was right. Got back to Dana Point on Monday and thought, I better check my Amazon account, see if I had a few orders trickle in. 374 books ordered. I only printed 200. I had to call the publisher and get them to drop ship and everything, but it happened. And when we got back from the Good Morning America, a similar situation happened, but not as great, and it was a different book. Well, 2005 passed, and yes, guess what? The town center plan drove us out. And Greta found this place over at Blue Lantern Plaza. You see Good Feet store. I think you can kind of see that on the left, down below. And we were next to it. And I said to the landlord before we signed the lease, can we put a patio on the back to capture the ocean view? There was a big, big window that we could break through. He said, yeah, you can do it. That's still there today. When you come down the hill, that's that patio on the back. Then, the next year, the space next to us on Blue Lantern with all the glass opened up. Landlord called me. I said, yes, we'd like it. This was a catering order we were doing that I think is the day we probably had the catering order on the front of the book. And it was a great place for singles fit functions and dining room and all that. But of course it doubled the rent, but it was a great, great move on our part. So that adversity of having to leave worked out. Off to Europe again in 2007. This time Greta and I are going on the Orient Express train from Venice to Prague to Paris. We're staying in a tiny little hotel near St. Mark's. Tiny. In a street you could barely move on. I don't even think they had cars. And we walk out and we hear, hey, Tutor and Spunky's. What? Ed Reiner and Darlene Jamroz were there. And we talked from Dana Point, and they had a big laugh. Why? On the way to the airport, LAX, they stopped at the Deli and got sandwiches to take on the plane. But they left them in the car, they forgot them. And so when this picture was taken in 2007, those sandwiches were toasting nicely in the car. But when they came back, we made good on our promise and replaced their sandwiches that they lost. So we had a really great time and enjoyed that. Again, when we got back to Deli, it was in great shape. You know, we really appreciated it. I took a day off in 2008 and was a marriage officiant. And I married Phil and Lori Green. They're on the left. And in the front row, there was this couple on the right. And everybody was kind of making a bigger to-do about them than the bride and groom. So I said, who is it? They said, well, that's the Alan Parsons of the Alan Parsons Project. Remember they did Sirius, Eye in the Sky? He produced the Abbey Road Beatles album. And another album, he partially produced it, but not entirely. Alan Parsons and his wife, and they were there. I kind of enjoyed having that picture taken with them. This is some of our staff in 2008. Just here again, you can see what nice, clean-cut kids we had, and it was a pleasure to have them. 2008, I'm talking to Miles Kemp. I think some of you remember Miles. He was a great locksmith in town. This was at a Chamber of Commerce function at Harvard National Bank, I believe, near that parking lot. And Miles is explaining to me, we had a great relationship, why he had a speaker like the fire department had on his truck. I said, why? He said, because if people stiff me or they don't pay me what they owe me, I go around town and I announce it on the speaker. And by God, he did. And the other thing is, he's trying to explain to me why he has the Sarah Palin bumper sticker on the rear of his truck. I just listened to him, you know. I didn't ask, I just listened. 2009, Debbie comes in the office, she says, magic is here, and leaves. I go, magic? So I walk out and hear a guy who had to duck to get under the front door. It's there, 6'10" or 11, whatever magic was. He came many times. He brought his employees there. They would have half the dining room for some of their meetings. Greta and I got to know him. He's a great guy, still lives, thinking, part-time in Dana Point over by the Ritz. And that's little Augustina, who is a daughter of one of our employees who's still with us. 2009, Dana Island Yachts owner Ed Fitzgerald, who had been great to us with catering orders. Joe, do you remember him? Okay. Disappeared. But he disappeared ostensibly with a lot of money belonging to other people. Now, this is not Ed Fitzgerald. The picture is Captain Richard Carnicel, who was a boat captain for Ed. And he's holding a photo up that the Dana Point Times did on Ed Fitzgerald. Ed eventually got arrested, brought back to California, spent time in state prison, and then now is living in Florida. I don't think he'll be coming back to live in Dana Point. February 10th, 2010, the McStay family went missing. On the right, the guy in the blue holding up the hands is my stepson, Joey. That's his 2 kids and his wife, and nobody knew where they were. And their van was found at the Mexican border, and everybody thought, well, they went to Mexico. No, I knew they didn't. I didn't have much touch with this family. This is a family that moved out of my house, but they were still at one point my stepsons. And I had a very bad feeling about it, but we didn't know. But they were gone. Nobody knew where they were. This picture was taken at Brad and Judy Brandmeier's backyard that year, and Terry Ross was there. And Terry, I teased her a bit because 21 or 2 years before, when I went to the bank to open my account, she saw me looking at the Chamber of Commerce thing on the wall. And she walked out and said, new business in town, Chamber of Commerce. You cannot leave the bank until you become a member of the Chamber. And I teased her about that 22 years later. September 11th, it wasn't right in these quarters, it was very close on this floor. Mayor Scott Schofeld presented us with the Business of the Month Award, and we totally appreciated that. I wanted to mention Victoria Station. Some of my buddies who worked at Victoria Station are in Dana Point. Picture on the left is Paul Hennessy, white jacket. Next to him is Martin Gershwitz, the entertainer some of you probably know around Dana Point. He's incredible. He plays at Hennessy's and that thing. I hired Paul Hennessy for Victoria Station as a busboy in 1972. He owns Hennessy's in Dana Point, San Juan Capistrano, and the poor boy owns 15 other Hennessy's. He owns 17 of them, so he's done quite well. I tell him it was a training I gave him at Dana Point. Now the other guy on the right-hand side with that silly Indiana Hoosier sweatshirt happens to be in this room tonight. That is Mike Stifer. We'll get to that. I jumped it a little soon. Anyway, Mike was at Victoria Station, Cincinnati, and he is here with his significant other, Joni, and I'd like you two to stand up, please. This is Mike in the picture. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Great guy, great guy. When we talk, it's usually for an hour or 2 hours, isn't it? Now, with them tonight in the front row are Daryl Paul, and Gina, his significant other. Notice saying that. And I'd like you guys to stand. A couple things. We've gone to their house for Super Bowl 5 or 6 times, the 4 of us, and sometimes people more, and we appreciate that. But I wanted to say one thing, Daryl. Tell me if I've got it right or not. Turkey and Swiss on on wheat with mayo, mustard, and tomato.
That's exactly right.
More than 100 times. He would come in the deli and he'd have a pretty good wad of bills and he'd start flipping them, you know. But thank you for all the business that you provided. 2011, I left the Orange County Register. Things were changing there. And I went to work for the Dana Point Times, the San Clemente Times, and the Capistrano Dispatch. It's called Picket Fence Media. And let me tell you, folks, we are so blessed to have a print newspaper in our own communities. And these people worked their tail off. They made it through the pandemic. They are incredible people. And I can't believe that it's been 10 years since I've been writing for them. And hope to keep it going. I have a column coming out Friday. I wanted to mention this club, and we're getting close to the finish line here, you guys. I wanted to mention this club because every year they would ride bicycles from LA to San Diego and stop at the deli and come in and have lunch. They were the greatest inspiration, I think, of anybody that ever came in the deli because half of them are blind and they ride their own bike. They don't go on two-wheelers. They ride their own bike alongside of somebody who has sight. And they are so gracious and so nice. And it was really great to have people like that come into the deli. Some of you might recognize Nellie. Nellie would hang out at the top of the stairs coming up from the parking lot at the table with her owner, Bud Short. Everybody, she was so friendly, would stop and pet that dog. And she was probably the most petted dog in the world. And she signed that, autographed that photo, and that went on the Deli Wall of Fame. Okay. Also in 2013, Coca-Cola donated a big teddy bear, and we did a drawing. And you can tell that Letitia, on the right-hand side, was thrilled to win it, and that picture went on the Wall of Fame also. Finally, 2013 rolls around, the town center plan breaks ground. That picture I took on Coast Highway. People in there you probably can't see, but Mayor Rayfield's there, and Enzo, and Jim Miller, and a few others. But two people who were there that day but are not in the picture to me were the unsung heroes of City Hall. Kathy Ward on the left, Jackie Littler on the right. Absolutely so great to the deli. I can't tell you how many times I brought catering orders up here, and what a pleasure and privilege the city of Dana Point was to have them working for us. Okay, this is our biggest sub ever, 30 feet. It was actually 5 6-footers, and our staff out there holding it. We're kind of proud of that one. We lost Miles Kemp in 2013. He was really a classic if any of you knew him. Just a great, great man. 2013 also, I got a phone call. It was from my stepson, Mikey, and I could tell from his voice that it wasn't good. And he said, "Tom, they're all gone." And what he meant was his brother, Joey, his wife, and the 2 babies. Their bodies were discovered in a shallow grave up near Victorville, and they had been brutally, brutally murdered. So at least we knew what had happened to them. And finally, they've gone to trial. Former business partner of Joey's has received the death penalty. And so there was some justice after all, but it was a tough, tough year. Winding down here, our Christmas party we always have at the deli for the employees. This was 4 of our lovely women, and you can see why it was such a pleasure to have the kids in the deli. Well, 2015, I sold the deli in January. It was a hell of a ride, you guys, for 26 years. It really was. The paper did an article in February of that year. 1 dream down, more to go. I really appreciated that. I didn't write it, by the way. They did that for me. Retirement hasn't been too bad. You might recognize the guy on the right. That's me on the left, the paddleboard. That's Russell Kerr. He used to be the head of the chamber. And interestingly enough, that's the Pilgrim in the middle before she sunk. We do that 2-3 times a week. It's a great thing to keep you going. We'll probably do some pickleball now, Gina, now that you've talked about it. Gina has a pickleball group in Orange County, and if you want to ask her about that, do that. This is the new current owner, Samantha, next to me. And then that's Debbie, 22 years at the Deli and still there. And then that's her sister, Elena. When we posed for that picture, their hair was up, and they said, wait a minute. Hair was down to their ankles. And Samantha is the new owner, and they're doing pretty well. It's been a tough go with COVID. This was a month ago, and I'm very proud of this picture, and I'll tell you why. That's Samantha next to me, but Theresa is behind me in the light blue. Sandy, whose daughter was standing next to Magic. Debbie, 22 years. Rosa on the far right, and Aniko, who's from Hungary. Rosa, Debbie, Sandy, and Theresa collectively worked at the Deli 120 years. And Theresa and Rosa still help out when they can. And Sandy and Debbie are both still there full time. Pretty incredible. So I'm really proud of it, and that was a book signing that day. If I had my life to live over a Deli, would I do it? Yeah, I think I would. Anyway, thank you very much. A couple things. We can do some Q&A, can we? I'll be downstairs. I believe we're going to be downstairs, right? Yeah. Signing if anybody'd like a book. I brought some of my other books too after we're done with the Q&A section. And the other thing I wanted to mention is I do have a Friday free e-newsletter every Friday. It's called On Life and Love After 50. If any of you want to sign up, it's no cost, no advertising. We don't use your name and stuff like that. I can give you a card and I can sign you up, or you can sign up. It's got some pretty good information if people are interested in what's going on with seniors and the dating and all that stuff. Gerald.
Kind of slipped over a golf ball hunting four-legged.
Okay. Daryl said I slipped over a dog golf ball hunter. And I'll mention Amy Lou now. She was my black lab. And one day before over by the new hotel, the Waldorf Astoria, was built, we would walk around there, and Amy went and picked up a golf ball and brought it back and dropped it. And I picked it up, and she went again. A minute later, she was back. I went home, and I said, gee, that might be a fun thing for us to do, and so I wrote them on a calendar. And over the 5 or 6 years, she collected over 9,000. And Daryl probably purchased 1,000 of them. He must be a bad golfer because he was losing a lot of balls. But she was really a classic. We had a big basket of balls there, and people would stop to get balls on the way to going to golf. And guess what they'd pick up? A sandwich. So that was the story. We were restricted time-wise. There's so much more I could have talked about, but I had to try to breeze through it, and so that's why Amy got left out. But I figured you would ask that.
Well, we have time for 10 minutes worth of questions, if any of you would like to ask Tom some questions. But I also wanted to say that everyone is invited down to our little museum downstairs. There were refreshments, and he will also have a table to sign books down there too. So
We'll be down.
Anybody have any questions? Oh.
Not a question, I just had a comment. That picture of the boat in the background where you were stand-up paddling, looked more like the Spirit of Dana Point. It didn't look like the boat.
Oh, well, maybe you're right. It was a float. Yeah, okay, yeah, the Pilgrim, did that have the yellow side to it?
No, the Pilgrim was black and white pattern.
Oh, okay.
It's
All right.
very much like the bottle down in the museum. That's
Okay, well, thank you for pointing that out. I won't mention that, except it's in the book.
Where did the name for the deli come from?
Oh, I feared that question. Where did the name Tutor and Spunky come from? Well, there's some different answers to that, but here's the official one that I give. My nickname for her, my wife at the time, was Spunky, because she was very spunky. And her nickname for me was Tutor. There's various rumors that fly around of why it was called Tutor, but I did help her boys with their classes and their studies. I would have spelled it Tooter, but my concern at that time was that people would start thinking, oh, they're tooting, and that was big back then, tooting cocaine. And so I changed the spelling to Tutor, and that's why it got changed. But that's the history on it, kind of. Anybody else? Okay, I really, really appreciate it. You guys are great, and we'll see you downstairs. Thank you.